Okay, picture this. You're a voracious reader. I mean, you're the kind of person who doesn't just read books. You inhale them.
You devour them.
Exactly. A book every day, maybe every 2 days. Your nightstand is just this, petering tower of paperbacks. Your Kindle is jammed full.
And you're always on the hunt for the next one, that next big idea.
Always. That next hit of information, that next framework, that aha moment. But then imagine you pick up one specific book. And suddenly, you just can't read anything else.
And not because you're bored.
No, not at all. It's the opposite. It's because every other book you pick up starts to feel, well, hollow, repetitive, kind of shallow,
Right, like you've heard it all before.
You realize that this one book has kind of crippled your ability to read anything else because the moment you try to analyze just the introduction, you get stuck. You're stuck there for 6 months.
6 months, just on an introduction.
6 months, and you still don't even finish it. That is the hook for today's deep dive. We are looking at the work and really the personal journey of Dr. Naif bin Nahar.
And that story is his story.
It's his personal admission, and it's radical. He says that since he truly started to know the Quran, not just recite it, but to really know it, he can no longer read other books the way he used to.
That's a massive claim.
Yeah.
And just for context, this isn't coming from someone who rejects modern thought or literature. He's an academic. Or a researcher.
Oh, not at all. He used to be that guy who read constantly. But his aha moment was this realization that human books, well, they tend to repeat their logic.
They build on each other.
Right. You read one philosopher and you realize, okay, he's just pivoting off the person who came 50 years before him. You read a political theorist and you realize, wait, I've read 5 others who built on this exact same premise. It feels circular.
But he argues the Quran is different.
Completely different. He says it just expands the more you research it. It's not circular, it's like exponential.
There's a story he tells about this that I found absolutely fascinating. It really drives the point home.
Is this the one on the flight?
That's the one. He was taking a long-haul flight, and he planned to study a specific political concept in the Quran. He had his notes, his laptop was out, ready to go.
All set for a productive flight.
Totally. He thought, okay, I'll just start with the opening chapter, Al-Fatiha, just for blessing.
Like a warm-up.
Exactly. Get the spiritual prep out of the way, and then I'll dive into the real work, the heavy political stuff.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Al-Fatiha is 7 short verses. It takes, 20 seconds to recite?
20, 30 seconds, tops. Well, he spent the entire flight on it. The entire flight, just on Al-Fatiha.
Wow.
He landed, went to his destination in Qatar, and then spent the next 6 months analyzing just that one short chapter. 6 months. And he says he still felt like he was only scratching the surface. He used the word crippled. He felt intellectually crippled by its depth.
That one word, crippled, it really sets the stage for what we're exploring today. Because I think for most people, even within the Muslim community, the conversation around the Quran is usually about something else.
Oh, absolutely. It's about beautiful recitation, it's about memorization, or it's about this concept of baraka.
Which means blessing, right?
Right. It's treated as a liturgical object, something you play in the car for protection, or that's read at funerals to comfort people who are grieving.
It gets relegated to the background of life or maybe the very end of life.
Exactly. It's not seen as an active manual for the here and now.
And that is precisely the perception that Dr. Nahar's work challenges. This is the central premise for our deep dive today. He's making the argument that the Quran is actually fundamentally a book of knowledge.
A cognitive foundation.
Yes, a cognitive foundation for managing all of human affairs. We're talking politics, sociology, psychology, education, the works.
So we're really trying to make a shift here from reading for blessing to
reading for civilizational construction. And if you take that argument seriously, if you really lean into it, it changes everything. It changes how you raise your kids, how you understand international relations, even how you understand your own internal psychology.
the total paradigm shift.
A complete one. So I think the best place to start is with this idea of it being a book of knowledge. Because Dr. Nahar brings up something really interesting here about how people project their own desires onto the text. He calls it fabrication.
Fabrication. That sounds like a strong word. It sounds like he's accusing people of lying.
It does, but he doesn't mean it in a malicious way. It's not about deliberate deceit. It's more about fabricating a purpose for the book that isn't its primary one.
Okay, explain that a bit more.
He argues that we often fabricate the Quran's purpose based on our own biases. It's like a mirror. You look into it and you see what you want to see.
The mirror effect. So give me an example.
Okay, so a liberal might look at the text, find a few verses about tolerance and peace,
Yeah.
cherry pick them and say, look, it's a book of peace and democracy.
And then on the other end of the spectrum,
An extremist looks at it, finds verses about battle and conflict and says, no, 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 it's a book of war.
right, and then you have the science crowd.
The scientific miracles crowd, they're always trying to find the Big Bang or embryology hidden in the verses, and they'll say, see, it's a science book.
And Dr. Nahr says all of these approaches are basically missing the point.
Completely. He says, look, you can't just project your own framework onto it. You have to let the Quran define itself. You have to ask, what does the book say its own purpose is?
And the answer it gives.
It's very explicit. Guidance for humanity, Hudan lilnas. Specifically, guidance to maintain human affairs and justice and what it calls the perfectly straight way.
So it's not a physics textbook. It's not concerned with the speed of light.
No, it's concerned with how you use the light. It's a manual for managing the human condition from the individual all the way up to the international level. He says it covers 3 domains.
Okay.
The descriptive, which is how things are, the interpretive, why things are the way they are, and the normative, how things should be.
How they are, why they are, and how they should be. That's
Yeah.
incredibly comprehensive.
It's a full-stack operating system for humanity. And if it's an operating system for how we think, then it has to deal with the very foundation of knowledge, what philosophers call epistemology.
Which brings us to the whole topic of doubt.
Yes. And I have to say, this was one of the most surprising parts of the source material for me, the discussion on doubt.
It's very counterintuitive, isn't it?
Huh.
I think we're conditioned to think of religious texts as demanding blind faith. You know, the classic line, don't ask questions, just believe.
Exactly. Doubt is seen as a weakness, a flaw in your faith.
But Dr. Nahr points out that the Quran actually validates and even encourages a very specific kind of doubt. He makes this crucial distinction between modernity doubt and Islamic doubt.
Okay, you have to break that down for us, because on the surface, doubt just feels like doubt. What's the real difference there?
So modernity doubt, as he describes it, is a permanent state of being. It's heavily influenced by postmodern philosophy, the idea that truth is relative.
My truth versus your truth.
Exactly. Nothing is certain. Everything is a social construct. You're supposed to doubt everything all the time, forever. It leads to this perpetual skepticism, where there's no such thing as absolute truth. There are only opinions.
Which can be totally paralyzing. It's like you're running on a treadmill. You're constantly exerting energy, asking questions, deconstructing everything, but you never actually get anywhere.
You never arrive. That's the key. But Islamic doubt, or the kind of doubt that's legitimized by the text, he calls it methodological doubt. It's not a destination, it's a bridge.
A bridge.
A bridge. You use doubt as a tool to reach certainty. He brings up this amazing quote from the famous theologian Ghazali, who said, "Who doesn't begin with doubt will end up with it.
Wow. Say that again?
Who doesn't begin with doubt will end up with it." The idea is that if you start with blind faith, eventually your faith will be shaken and you'll end up in a state of permanent corrosive doubt. But if you start with honest questions, with a demand for evidence, you build a foundation of certainty that can't be shaken.
I love that image. Doubt isn't the swamp you get stuck in. It's the tunnel you drive through to get to the light on the other side. You're not supposed to set up camp in the tunnel.
That's a perfect way to put it. You're meant to pass through it. And this whole idea leads directly into his critique of separating science from values. This is a huge piece of his argument for why the Quran is necessary as a cognitive foundation.
Okay.
He says science on its own is just a tool, a powerful tool, but it cannot be a guide. It's morally neutral.
And he used some really sharp examples here to make his case. I'm thinking of anthropology and sociology.
Right. Let's take anthropology. Think about an anthropologist who's classifying societies. They might go to a village in the Amazon and label it a traditional society, and then they go to New York City and call it an advanced society.
That sounds scientific. Sounds like a neutral classification.
It sounds like it, right?
Yeah.
One has mud huts, the other has skyscrapers. Seems simple.
But Dr. Nahr pushes back on that. He asks the crucial question, what is the standard for that classification? Who decided that skyscrapers are the measure of advanced and that an agrarian communal lifestyle is traditional or primitive?
That's not a scientific fact.
No. It's not a fact like the boiling point of water. It's a value judgment. It's a cultural bias that's been dressed up in the language of science.
A Western materialistic value system is being presented as objective reality.
Precisely. Or take sociology. A sociologist studies social problems, but again, who defines what a problem is?
The value system does.
Exactly. He uses the example of premarital sex. In a conservative or religious society, sociology would study that as a problem to be solved because it might disrupt family lineage or social cohesion.
But in a liberal, secular society.
It's not a problem at all. It's just a lifestyle choice. The science of sociology can describe the mechanics of the behavior, it can run surveys and collect data, but only a value system, only what the Quran calls guidance, can tell you if it's ultimately good or bad for human beings.
It draws the line between what is and what ought to be. Science is stuck in what is.
And this is where he gets to what he calls the nightmare scenario. This is where the stakes get really high.
Yeah, this part is chilling. He argues that knowledge, when it's separated from divine guidance, becomes a nightmare, an absolute nightmare.
He points to the atomic bomb, the pinnacle of scientific intelligence.
The scientists at Los Alamos were geniuses. They solved one of the most complex physics problems in history. But that intelligence, without a moral compass, gave humanity the power to annihilate itself.
He also points to the engineers who joined extremist groups like Daesh.
Right, this is so important. These weren't uneducated, ignorant people. Many were highly intelligent, skilled individuals. Engineers, doctors, programmers. They had the intelligence, but they lacked what he calls rationality.
And that's the key distinction.
It's everything. Science describes the mechanism for splitting the atom. The Quran provides the ethical compass that tells you not to turn it into a weapon.
That distinction between intelligence and rationality is something I really want to circle back to when we get to the education section, because that just blew my mind. But we can't skip over the politics.
No, we can't.
Because this is where Dr. Nehar's personal deep dive really challenged my own assumptions about the Quran.
The political model.
Yeah, he's very candid about his own journey. He admits that back in 2012, he was like most people. He thought there were very few political verses in the text. He thought it was mostly about prayer, fasting, personal ethics.
And now?
Now he says he sees hundreds of verses dealing with statecraft.
It's that complete shift in perception. Once you stop looking for the literal word politics and you start looking for the concepts, war, peace, international relations, treaties, alliances, internal stability, suddenly the text just opens up in a new way.
And he says it goes way beyond the simple idea of shura, or consultation, which is what most people think of when they think of Islamic politics.
Shura is just one piece of the puzzle.
A tiny piece. He says it's a comprehensive framework. And he gives an absolute masterclass on this using one specific concept, the deterrence theory. I want to walk through this slowly because it's so logical, it's almost mathematical.
It really is. He breaks down a specific verse which starts, if you fear treachery from any people. So step one, the context. Uncertainty.
Right. You have an ally, a treaty partner, but you have a credible reason to suspect they might stab you in the back. There's a threat of betrayal.
And what's the modern, maybe liberal or pacifist reaction to that?
You send a diplomat. You write a sternly worded letter to the UN. Let's talk this out.
But the Quranic logic here is rooted in power dynamics, realpolitik. The next step in the verse is, prepare against them whatever you are able of power. Build up your strength.
Not just any strength. The verse specifies end of steeds of war by which you may terrify the enemy of God and your enemy.
And that word is key. To terrify. It's a very strong word. It's not to warn or to discourage. The goal of the power is to induce terror.
That sounds aggressive.
It sounds aggressive, but look at the strategic outcome. The logic flows like this. You build up power, which creates a balance of power. That balance of power creates a balance of fear. That balance of fear leads to a balance of deterrence.
And what is the ultimate result of successful deterrence?
Peace. The verse doesn't end with, and then attack them. It continues. But if they incline to peace, then you incline to it.
So peace isn't the result of weakness. It's not the result of just being nice and hoping for the best. Peace is the direct result of the other side being too scared to attack you.
Exactly. Dr. Nehar's argument is that weakness is provocative. It invites aggression. If you look weak, you are begging to be attacked. But if you are strong, terrifyingly strong, you force the potential aggressor to choose peace because the alternative is their own destruction. Strength is stabilizing.
That's a very pragmatic, not at all idealistic view of international relations. It feels very grounded in how the world actually works.
Completely. But then he brings in this other theory that I found just as fascinating, which deals with internal politics. He calls it the elongated arm theory.
Okay, the elongated arm. What's that about?
This is a sociological law that he derives from a different verse. The verse says, nay, surely man transgresses, because he considers himself self-sufficient.
Okay, let's just sit with that for a second. Man transgresses, crosses the line, becomes a tyrant because he considers himself self-sufficient.
That's it. That's the psychological root of all tyranny and rebellion, according to this model. When a human being or a group feels they don't need anyone else, when they feel fully independent and powerful, it's almost inevitable that they will cross the line. They will transgress.
So how does that apply to the internal politics of a state?
He applies it to what he calls the elongated arm. Think about a government that creates a special forces unit, or a paramilitary group, or a powerful intelligence agency to project its power and do its dirty work.
An arm of the state.
Exactly. At first, that group is completely loyal. They are tools of the central government. They're dependent on it for money, weapons, legitimacy.
But over time,
that group gets more guns, more money, more influence. They build their own networks, and eventually they reach a tipping point where they start to feel self-sufficient.
and they look back at the government that created them.
And they say, "Why are we taking orders from you? We're the ones with the real power. We don't need you anymore." And then they rebel.
They try to become the head, not just the arm.
Exactly. And he uses incredible historical and modern examples to back this up. Think of the Janissaries in the Ottoman Empire.
They started as slave soldiers, right?
The most dependent people imaginable. They were slaves, taken as boys, with no ties to anyone except the Sultan. But they became the most elite, powerful force in the empire, and eventually they were the ones overthrowing sultans. They felt self-sufficient.
We've seen this happen so recently, too, the Wagner Group in Russia.
It's a perfect textbook example. Putin's elongated arm, his private army, until its leader, Prigozhin, decided he was self-sufficient enough to march on Moscow.
And he mentions Sudan as well.
The RSF and Hamidi, same story. A paramilitary force created by the state that grew so powerful it felt self-sufficient and turned on its master. Dr. Nahar argues this isn't a series of coincidences. It's a predictable, Quranic sociological law. If you create a subordinate power and you allow it to become self-sufficient, it will turn on you.
That is actually really predictive. It's like a warning label for anyone involved in statecraft. Warning, do not let your bodyguards get too rich or too powerful.
Precisely. And it shows how the text moves from describing a simple human emotion arrogance from self-sufficiency to predicting the rise and fall of empires.
It's credible. Okay, let's pivot from the fate of empires to the fate of our own minds. Section 3, education and human psychology. You mentioned it earlier, and I want to dive into it now. This distinction between intelligence and rationality.
Yes, this is, for me, one of the most powerful critiques of modern education I've ever heard. Dr. Nahar argues that our entire global education system is obsessed with one thing: intelligence.
And how does he define intelligence?
Intelligence is basically a set of tools. It's your mental processing power. It includes memory, analytical skills, calculation, logic.
So it's like the processor in a computer. The specs. How fast can it run the numbers?
That's a great analogy. It's the hardware. And the thing about hardware, the thing about a processor, is that it's neutral. It's amoral.
It doesn't care what program you run on it.
Exactly. As we discussed, you can be a genius physicist and still be a racist. You can be a brilliant inventor and create weapons of mass destruction. Intelligence does not give you a moral compass.
So what's the alternative? What's the goal of a chronic education model?
The goal is to produce rationality, which in Arabic is rushed. And rationality is not just intelligence. It is intelligence plus wisdom plus a moral purpose. It's the wisdom to use your mental tools for good.
It's the software, the operating system.
The ethical operating system. He asks a very pointed question. Why do we want smart engineers? If we just want them to build bridges that don't collapse, then sure, intelligence is enough. But if we want them to build a just and sustainable civilization, then we need them to be rational human beings, not just smart economic units.
And to get to that point, to build that rationality, you first have to understand the raw material you're working with. And man, the Quran does not pull its punches when it diagnoses human nature.
Chuckles. No, it really does not. It's brutally honest. Dr. Nahar lists about 15 negative traits that the Quran uses to diagnose the default human condition.
It's like a roast of the entire species.
It totally is. It says humans are, by default, impatient, fretful, niggardly or stingy, hasty, argumentative, unjust, ignorant. The list goes on.
It's not very flattering.
No, but he says we shouldn't take it as an insult. It's a diagnosis. It's the doctor telling you what's wrong so you can start the treatment. This is our baseline.
He also makes the point that these traits are latent versus active.
Yes, this is key. Everyone has the potential for all these traits. They're like dormant viruses in our system. The environment you put yourself in is what activates them.
So, for example, if you hang out with stingy people all the time,
Your own latent stinginess will get activated. You'll start thinking that way. If you're in a high-stress, competitive corporate environment, your fretfulness and anxiety will activate.
so the entire goal of education then isn't just to pour math and science into a kid's head.
Not at all. The primary mission of parenting and schooling in this model should be what he calls cleansing these 15 traits. It's an act of purification. It's about moving the human from the default human model, which is weak, hasty, and anxious, to the believer model, which is firm, patient, and generous.
And if you fail to do that,
Then you've failed completely.
uh-huh.
If you graduate a student who is a math genius, but is still fundamentally fretful and stingy and unjust, you haven't educated them. You've just built a smarter monster.
There's a visual metaphor he uses for this journey of self-cleansing that I found incredibly powerful: the mountain path.
Oh, yes. This is a beautiful and, frankly, terrifying metaphor for life. He says that human beings are not born at the top of the mountain or at the bottom. We're all born somewhere in the middle of a steep mountain path.
And gravity is always pulling us down.
Always. Gravity in this metaphor is our lusts, our laziness, our desires, those 15 negative traits. They're the path of least resistance. To just stay where you are, to not slide down, requires constant effort.
And to ascend.
To climb upwards towards that believer model requires real struggle. It requires jihad, which in this context means the struggle against the self. It's hard work. But to descend, that's the easiest thing in the world. You just have to stop trying. You let go, and gravity does the rest.
And then there's the free fall.
That's the scariest part of the metaphor. He describes polytheism, or associating partners with God, not just as a theological error. He says the Quran describes it as falling from the sky, a complete, uncontrolled free fall to the bottom where you were shattered. You lose your essential humanity.
To help us navigate this path, he also categorizes the types of mistakes we make. I found this really helpful for self-reflection. It's like a taxonomy of screwing up.
It really is.
Eh.
A very practical guide. He says there are 3 fundamental types of mistakes. The first is the mistake of negligence.
Okay.
This is like the mistake the angels made when they asked God, "Why would you create man who will cause corruption and shed blood?" They didn't have all the information. It was a mistake born of ignorance. And the cure is simple. A warning, more knowledge.
So that's the I didn't know mistake.
Exactly. The second type is the mistake of weakness. This is the mistake of Adam. He knew the rule, don't eat from the tree, but his desire, his weakness overcame him. He was tempted and he fell.
We all have those Adam moments.
Constantly. This is a normal human error. And the cure is also simple: repentance. You recognize your weakness, you feel remorse, and you turn back to the right path.
But the third one is different.
The third one is the most dangerous. This is the mistake of rebellion and arrogance. This is the mistake of Iblis or Satan. It's not, "I couldn't help myself." It's, "I am better than him." It's a conscious refusal of the divine order based on pride.
And the really dangerous part about this one, he says, is that it leads to legitimizing the sin.
This is the key. This is the difference between a simple slip-up and a complete change in worldview.
Explain that.
When you sin out of weakness, like Adam, you feel guilty. You know what you did was wrong. You say, "I shouldn't have done that." But when you sin out of arrogance, like Iblis, you have to justify it. You start to say, "This isn't actually wrong because," or "I deserve this," or "the rules don't apply to me."
You rewrite the moral code to fit your actions.
Precisely. That act of justification, of legitimizing the sin, is the gateway to the free fall. It's the shift from accidentally slipping your foot off the path to consciously deciding to jump off the cliff.
That is profound. So it's not the action itself that's the point of no return. It's the internal narrative you build around the action. If you justify it, you can't repent for it because you no longer see it as something to repent from.
You've made yourself your own god.
Okay, so we've got the diagnosis of the human condition. We've got the mountain path we're all on. Now we need a map, a guide. This brings us to what Dr. Nohar calls the Quranic compass, a practical manual for life.
Yes, and this is where it gets really, really practical. He argues this compass is the missing element in all modern education. We learn calculus, but we don't learn when to confront, when to ignore, when to criticize, or when to partner.
Let's start with that first one, knowing when to confront evil and when to just ignore it.
This is such a critical point, especially in our hyper-connected, outrage-driven world. We're often taught a very simplistic rule. Stand up to bullies, speak truth to power. Silence is violence. It's presented as a universal good to always confront.
But Dr. Nehar says the Quranic compass is more nuanced.
Much more. He says the rule is this: evil is of 2 types. One type of evil dies when you confront it. The other type of evil dies when you ignore it.
And if you mix those two up, it's a disaster.
A complete disaster. He uses the famous example of Salman Rushdie. Back in the 1980s, Rushdie was a relatively unknown author. When he wrote his book, The Satanic Verses, Dr. Nihar argues that if the Muslim world had simply ignored it, if they had treated it as the trashy, obscure fiction it was, it likely would have gathered dust in a few bookstores in London and disappeared.
But that is not what happened.
No. A fatwa was issued calling for his death. People burned the book in the streets. There were protests globally. The entire world was talking about it.
And what was the result?
The confrontation provided what he calls the fuel of attention. It turned an unknown book into a global bestseller and made a C-list author into a household name and a millionaire. The evil needed the attention to survive and spread, and its opponents gave it exactly that.
He contrasts this with another story, right? The story of Abdul Wahhab al-Masiri.
Yes, and it's the perfect inverse example. Al-Masiri was an Egyptian scholar who wrote a massive, multi-volume, incredibly detailed encyclopedia on the history and ideology of Zionism. It was a devastating intellectual critique, scholarly, rigorous, undeniable.
So what did the Zionist organizations do? Did they burn it? Did they protest and give it attention?
No, they did the opposite. They engaged in what he calls conspiracy of silence. They ignored it completely. They didn't debate it. They didn't review it. They didn't mention it. And as a result, despite its academic brilliance, it had far less impact than it should have. They understood that confronting it would only legitimize it and spread its ideas.
That is tactical genius, and it's such a relevant lesson for us in the age of social media outrage.
Absolutely. His point is that triviality and certain types of provocative evil thrive on attention. When you quote tweet a troll to dunk on them, you are feeding them. You are amplifying their message. The Quranic compass says, "Learn to identify which battles are worth fighting and which evils starve without your oxygen. Don't fight side battles. Even if you could win them, you lose precious energy that was meant for your main goal."
Speaking of timing in battles, he has a very pointed take on the timing of criticism. And this feels incredibly relevant to a lot of the conflicts happening in the world right now.
It is. He brings up the concept from the Quran of standing firm during a conflict. The verse says, "O you who have believed, when you encounter a company in battle, stand firm." From this, he derives a principle. He says criticism is a virtue. Self-reflection and accountability are good. But when applied at the wrong time, that virtue becomes a vice.
And the wrong time is?
When the battle is raging. He discusses conflicts like the Al-Aqsa flood or any major existential struggle a community faces. The principle is, when you are facing an active external threat, the number one priority is solidarity and firmness.
But what if your side is making a mistake? What if the strategy is wrong?
His argument is that the time for that criticism is before the battle, in the planning and strategy phase, or after the battle, in the debrief and review phase. But if you start criticizing your own side's strategy during the battle, you are destroying morale from within. You are psychologically aiding the enemy.
That's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people who value constant critique and dissent as a core principle.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But he's not saying shut up and fall in line forever. He's saying it's about timing. It's battlefield logic. If a soldier in a trench starts loudly questioning the general's plan in the middle of a firefight, it doesn't help anyone. It just causes chaos and gets people killed. The priority in that moment is firmness and psychological solidity.
It's about survival first, then reflection.
Precisely.
Another part of this Quranic compass that really struck me was what he calls the no-surrender policy.
This is so powerful. He argues that there is simply no concept of giving up or surrendering to despair in the Quranic worldview. It's not an option on the table. He points to the story of the siege of Shib Abi Talib in early Islamic history.
This was when the early Muslims were boycotted in Mecca, right?
Totally boycotted. They were trapped in a valley for years. No one would trade with them. They were starving to the point where they were eating leaves and boiled leather. But the idea of surrender wasn't even considered.
But you hear people say it all the time today. I can't do anything. The problem is too big. The world is too messed up. I'm just one person.
And Dr. Nahar calls that a psychological trick. It's a trick we play on ourselves to escape the guilt of inaction. If I can convince myself that I am utterly powerless, then I don't have to feel bad about doing nothing.
So the Quranic compass rejects that entirely.
Completely. It demands action, but it's realistic. It demands action within your scope. There are levels of action.
Okay, what are the levels?
Can you fight injustice physically? If not, can you donate money to help those who can? If you have no money, can you use your skills? Technology, media, writing, art. If you can't do that, can you at least support the families of those who are on the front lines? There's always a level of action available to you. To say, I can't do anything, is a lie we tell ourselves to feel better.
That connects, in a way, to his discussion on cancel culture versus repentance, this idea of being defined by a single action.
Yes, it's a very sharp contrast. Modern society, especially online, is incredibly unforgiving. One old tweet from 10 years ago can resurface, and your career is over. Your reputation is ruined. You're canceled. It ignores a lifetime of good for one mistake.
But the Quranic view is different.
Fundamentally different. The Quranic view is that repentance restarts your life. It's not just a patch-up job, it's a full system reboot. He makes this beautiful point that Adam's life, his real journey as a prophet, truly began after his mistake and his repentance.
Wow, that's a powerful reframing. The mistake wasn't the end of his story, it was the beginning of his real story.
Exactly. The mistake was the prerequisite for the wisdom that followed. And the takeaway for us is, don't let other people define you by your worst moment. If you are right with the divine standard, if you have sincerely repented, then the people's standard, which is fickle and changes every single day, doesn't matter.
Let's zoom out now to the bigger social picture. Section 5 in our sources, social models and the illusion of modernity. Dr. Nahar seems pretty worried about the direction the Gulf states, and perhaps the wider Muslim world, are heading.
He is. He's deeply concerned. He sees a widespread effort to replicate the modern Western model, which he argues prioritizes the creation of the economic man.
The economic man. I've heard this term before. What does it mean in this context?
It's the idea that human beings are primarily economic units. Our value is determined by our productivity, our income, our consumption, and we measure the progress of a society by its wealth, its GDP, the height of its skyscrapers, the number of luxury brands in its malls.
And he's saying that's a mistake.
A huge mistake. He makes the point that materialism is not modernity. Skyscrapers and high incomes are signs of wealth, yes, but they are not necessarily signs of civilizational progress.
And he contrasts the economic man with what he calls the authentic man.
Right. The authentic man is a human being who is connected to social bonds, to family, to community, to a set of values, to a higher purpose beyond just making and spending money. And he warns that if you strip away that authenticity in the pursuit of pure materialism, you end up with a social nightmare.
And he points to Japan as the ultimate warning sign.
Yes. The statistics he uses about Japan are absolutely horrifying. They're a wake-up call.
He talks about the high suicide rates.
Over 20,000 people a year, consistently. But the detail that just sticks with you, the one that's truly heartbreaking, is the 500 children a year who throw themselves in front of trains. Children.
And the Kotokushi phenomenon.
The lonely death. This is where people, usually elderly, die completely alone in their apartments and are not found for weeks or even months.
Until the smell eludes the neighbors.
Exactly. He mentions that this is so common in Japan that there's an entire industry built around cleaning up these apartments, and that the real estate value of a property plummets by up to 80% if a body has been found there months later. There's a market pricing for loneliness and social decay.
That is the ultimate cost of the economic man model taken to its extreme. Maximum wealth, maximum technology, but total social isolation.
And he contrasts that with traditional societies, like in the Gulf. He says, look at our societies now. If an elderly person gets a simple fever, the entire extended family shows up at their house or the hospital. The room is full. You can't be alone even if you want to be.
That social solidarity, he argues, is the true wealth.
That is true modernity, in the sense of a developed and healthy human experience. He worries that in the rush to build the shiny skyscrapers, they might be accidentally importing the lonely death along with the architecture.
This leads to the final point in this section, the illusion of neutrality. Because there's this pressure, especially in academia and media, to be neutral, to just observe and report, not take a side.
Dr. Nahar rejects this idea completely. He tells a personal story about a French academic who advised him not to speak out on politically charged topics like Gaza in order to maintain his academic neutrality.
But the Quranic compass doesn't allow for that kind of neutrality.
Not at all. The Quranic rebuttal is that there is no neutrality between right and wrong, between justice and oppression. To be neutral in the face of injustice is to side with the oppressor.
He even quotes Ayn Rand on this, which I found interesting.
He does. Neutrality is a temporary stage that eventually leads to accepting vice. If you see a great injustice happening and you say, well, I'm neutral on this, you have effectively given your consent to the injustice. The Quranic mandate is to stand for justice. It's not presented as an option. It's presented as the very definition of faith.
So we've covered a huge amount of ground here. We've gone from epistemology and the nature of doubt to politics and deterrence theory to individual psychology, all the way to the collapse of social models. Dr. Nahar's vision is massive. It really is a deep dive into a completely different way of seeing the world.
It is. It's a fundamental shift from seeing the Quran as a book of barakah, a kind of lucky charm, to seeing it as a cognitive foundation, a lens through which you are meant to see and interpret everything else.
So for the listener who's been with us this whole time and is thinking, okay, I'm sold, I want to try this, I want to read like this, I want to be crippled by this book, where do they even start? Dr. Nahar suggests a very practical first step, a technique.
The why technique.
It's as simple as that.
It's that simple, but it's incredibly profound. He says don't just read and recite the words. Stop. Stop at every single word if you have to and ask why.
Give me an example.
Why does the opening chapter, Al-Fatiha, start with Alhamd, which is all praise, and not Al-Shukr, which is all thanks? What's the difference? Why does it say Lord of the worlds, not God of the worlds? Why is there no conclusion chapter to the Quran? No, the end. Every detail is deliberate.
It sounds like he's encouraging what's known as tadabbur.
Exactly. Tadabbur, which means deep pondering or contemplation. And he makes a very important clarification. He says this is different from tafsir, which is formal exegesis or commentary.
Tafsir is for scholars.
Right. Tafsir requires knowledge of Arabic grammar, history, legal theory. It's a specialized science. But tadabbur, he says, is for everyone. It's a direct personal engagement with the text. It's about letting the text interrogate you as much as you interrogate it.
And asking why isn't disrespectful.
On the contrary, it's the key that unlocks the whole thing. The text itself invites the challenge. It asks, do they not then ponder the Quran? It's a command, not a suggestion.
You know, as we wrap up, Dr. Nahar left us with a final, very provocative thought. He suggested that as a civilization, we are currently harvesting the wrong tree.
That image really sums up his entire argument. We are obsessed with harvesting from the tree of intelligence and the tree of material wealth. We spend billions, trillions of dollars on education systems designed to create smart, productive economic units.
But we're neglecting the other tree.
We are completely neglecting the tree that grows the Quranic compass, the tree of rationality, of social immunity, of moral clarity.
And the result of that neglect?
The result is that if the productive mind of our civilization remains separated from the divine guidance of the Quran, then all the knowledge we produce might just become a nightmare. We might build the atomic bomb, but not have the wisdom to stop ourselves from using it. We might build the richest society in human history, but find ourselves dying alone in a silent apartment.
That is a heavy but incredibly necessary realization. We need to switch trees.
We need to start harvesting rationality, not just intelligence.
So to our listener, next time you open that book, maybe don't just chant the words. Stop, ask why, and see if it doesn't stop you from being able to read anything else for a while.
It might just cripple you in the best way possible.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one. Keep pondering.